So if you saw one of my earlier videos where I talked about doing an import from Japan, a box full of boomboxes and bits and pieces, I mentioned that there were a few small ones, a couple of which I've featured, like that Sanyo Town for example, and then a big one, There She Blows. This belongs to a friend. I imported it for him to have. This is from about 1980, I believe. This is the GF-508 SB. I believe it's called the SB because it's got black surrounds on the speakers and the dark paintwork. The European equivalent to this and the American equivalent, I believe, is the GF-9696. Quite hard to find, and got to say the condition of this, considering this is to this date 44 years old, is absolutely stunning. This is going to need work on the tape deck, and I've never powered this up. This is because it's an import. This is a 100-volt Japanese domestic market model. It does have a 15-volt DC connector on the side, which I'm going to supply a power supply for when this is done, and we're going to run it from that. If I can make any modification to the transformer to run it from 240 volts, I'll look into that, but my fallback is really running them from a good quality DC supply. I've just had to prop this up a little bit on just on my other camera remote control, just get a little bit of light on it because it's dark at the front. One of the really appealing features of this model, other than its gargantuan size, is that the speaker grills come off and then it reveals a bit of bling going on here, and these controls, because these are three-way speakers, I think it's these center tweeters, they've got separate controls for the level of the tweeters there. The majority of the legends and text are in Japanese, because again this is a Japanese market. I find that really cool, but anyone who's using one in a Western market will probably want to use their phone with the translate on there to do the live translation. Because this is I believe the top of the range of this size model, and the biggest one they made before they jumped to the well-known 777 as it was in the Western market, 909 it was, and a few others in the Japanese market, one with the big 4 speakers. These actually use the same amp as the 777. They use the same amplifier chip. Obviously they haven't got as many speakers, but they have the same power more or less in the amplifiers. They've got a variable tape speed and an echo for a microphone input, because of course it's Japanese market, so at the top of the tree they were thinking about the karaoke market, I guess. Fortunately this does cover the full FM band. The actual FM radio broadcast band for the Japanese market went from 76 to 96, something like that. And then the top end of the channel was used for television sound, which is why we've got this TV and the 1, 2 and 3 icon on there. Most Japanese radios, by extending them to the full 108, allowed the set to pick up radio broadcast sound, so you could listen to the news or something on a stereo, or if this produced better quality audio than a portable television, for example, you could run the audio out of the big audio unit and the screen from the TV. Something we didn't really get that much of in the Western market, apart from things like simulcasts, which would cast the FM stereo audio on an actual radio station, but it wouldn't be up on its own dedicated frequency band like it was in Japan. Anyway, I'm waffling too much. Let's just open this a second. These are well known for having issues at this age with the rubber, the belts of course, the pinch rollers, and there is a rubber sleeve that rides on the pinch roller that passes the motion to the, I think it's to the take-up, and they're known for perishing. The whole lot's known for perishing. Now, slightly concerningly, before I got this out, I did check it. When I got this, the pinch rollers definitely look dried out, and I have got a kit. There's a kit on eBay. I've got a kit to redo all the belts, the sleeve and the pinch roller. Concerningly, when I first got this, the pinch roller I remember being quite dry, but checking it now, I'm spotting a little like grease spot or oil spot on it. So as I say, I've never tried this, I'm not going to. I'm going to open it up first. There's dust inside the speakers under the grills here, which is a good sign because it means they've probably very rarely been removed. I don't know what it's like inside, but as I say, externally it's beautiful. The only bit of kind of damage, and it's just off shot here, I'll show it later, is the tuning knob. The chrome plating on one edge is peeling off, so I might either find another or paint this with chrome paint and clear coat it afterwards. Won't make the mistake I made previously with clear coat. I've got a service manual for this, so my priority is to go inside it and sort out this tape deck to see what state that's in, and then have a look at the rest of it inside it. I do a clean up on it. As I say, it's generally very good, but I can see inside it will want it. The speakers of course will want it. I don't think we need to ink the speakers or anything like that. On this one they're very evenly coloured, they don't look faded. I think it's been really well looked after. It was expensive, and I did have to pay another £100 tax bill after that box had come in, because it was a massive box. As I say, they're quite difficult to find in Western markets, and people tend to want a lot of money for them, especially as they're getting fashionable now. People tend to want a real premium for them, so it was a little bit cheaper importing one from Japan, but of course then it's in Japanese. It does won't work, so it was bought as a non-working item, as they call them in Japan, junk. So I did get this quite a bit cheaper than it would have been if it was fully working, of course. But yeah, I'm going to pull up the service manual on here. Don't know if I mentioned both antennas are present and correct, so we don't need to worry about anything like that. And but yeah, it's that tape deck that's a primary concern, so we'll see if we can have a look at the state of that, have a look at the state of it inside. I expect it's probably just dusty. See if we've got any capacitor issues or anything like that, all the usual stuff, and see how we get on with it. So I'm going to make a little change to the way I usually do this as an experiment. I feel like the recent videos are getting a bit too long, and a lot of what I was doing on this machine was not as much restoration work as I've done in the other ones. It was in immaculate condition inside, really. It's been very well looked after. So I'm going to do a voiceover on a lot of this and condense it way down, as I think the issues I'm dealing with here are exactly what I expected. Here of course I'm just taking all the screws out. This machine's a little bit different to the other ones I've worked on in that you actually remove the front panel when you tip it onto its back. So you have to remove all the switches and knobs on top, and just out of shot the tuner knob on the side, that has to be pulled out as well. And then you can, once you've done this, you can flip it over and you can take the two knobs off the front from the faders, the echo and the tape speed faders, and the little switches. I use a little IC puller for these because they're quite tricky to get your fingers underneath. And then when you've got all those off, you can take the tape door off as well. You can take the two little screws out there and the tape door lifts off. And then the whole top panel, once it's on its back, actually lifts off, including the speakers. And then we get to see inside. And look how clean that is. It's pretty cool. Loosen these off. Loosen that one off. We've got one connector here with a blue and orange wire, a sort of translucent plug on it. Got a yellow wire by right channel, a blue wire by left channel, sorry, a white wire by left channel, excuse me. And up at the top you've got, it actually says black, and next to that blue there we go. And there's this large connector here. I think that's everything, yes. So just inside the front there's the big speakers. That's really clean. Oh, that's a little bit awkward. It looks like there's a post in the way of that, so it looks like the counter has to come out in order to do the counterbelt relief switch there. And this is what was worrying me. I can see from here that capstan sleeve looks like it has melted, and some of that is probably what's migrating to this idler tyre, which I might have to replace because one of those didn't come in the kit. And the pinch roller, there's a transformer which mentions it's a fixed 100 volts, so 11.6 volts, so if you could find a 12 volt transformer to fit that, potentially it could be swapped. I might consider that, but I think mainly we'll think about running it, as I mentioned earlier, off the DC input. So this horrible gunk has smeared all over this idler tyre, and if you can just about see that washer in the top of that wheel, it's unfortunately not a split washer, so I couldn't just remove that whole pulley, so I decided to take this idler tyre off and seek a replacement. I could have cleaned it up maybe, but considering that's going to be pressed against a new piece of rubber later, I just don't know what the state of it's going to be, so away it goes. Then I've removed this little spring just so that I can get this wheel out of the way as much as possible. Shame I can't take it off, but there we go. Then this little washer here looks really easy there to take off. I can assure you it wasn't. It took ages to try and get that off. Then I have to remove this spring. This is at the point I wish I'd focus lock the camera, but I'm concentrating on the repair. So I have to put all these pieces aside, and then this sort of top linkage comes off, and then there's another linkage underneath which is just about covering up the edge of that pinch roller assembly, and if you lift it off a little bit at the top, just push it aside, the pinch roller, if you push that spring at the top away, it just comes out like that. And then you can push the little axle through, which actually went flying across the room like that. Luckily it landed on the bench. And then I gave everything a good clean down. It wasn't too bad, but it's important to get that capstan shaft clean because that's going to be pulled through the bearing soon. So this pinch roller has gone to hard plastic, and I tried rubber restorer, I tried alcohol. You can probably see that nothing's getting the tyre off. There's a tyre that's been left behind on it, and that's always a sign that they're ready for replacing. Just nothing's really cleaned up at all, and it just feels like hard plastic. It feels awful. So it was an attempt to clean it, and the thought that I can maybe reuse it somewhere, but no, it's going in the bin. The new one in the new kit is much better. Then we get on to the horror. This is the bit that I've had to move everything out of the way to get to, and you can see this little rubber tyre here has just turned to goo. I think it probably reacts with the oils, perhaps in the bearings. It always seems to be the first one that goes, and it's all kind of in this well, so I've got to try and get all that out. So the real way to tackle this is to take the transport out, and to do that you have to remove the tuner faceplate. So what I did here was tune the needle all the way to the right, and then you remove these 4 screws. All these screws are identical, and then it looks like the tuner faceplate, once these are out, will just come straight off, but it doesn't quite. There's little plastic clips in this white piece where the microphone is, where you just have to very carefully loosen them so that it will unclip, and then just carefully slide it forward because the needle will stay in place. This is the scary part. And then don't rag the board off, but just tip it backwards. There's another little circuit board on the back of that which you have to unclip, and then it will come out. And then once that's out, you can set the faceplate aside, and the needle is still there. I end up putting some card over that later on to protect it. Now there's some connectors that have to be removed from the transport. One down the right side there, and then these 2 at the front edge on that front board. They pretty much land back where they were, so you know where they went. It's pretty much impossible to mix them up. There's one more, there's a yellow wire I'll point out later I could have removed, and then the whole transport comes out, but it took me ages to spot that. The 2 transport screws at the top corners are identical. The left one is different to the others, and the right one is different to the others. The right one is quite a bit longer. The left one has the screw thread going all the way up to the screw head. It doesn't have a shank on it. Then there's one more connector here in the middle, just next to the counter. It's a bit of a fiddle to get out that because there's not a lot of room, But once that's out, you lift the transport and lift it forward towards yourself. To be very careful, you can tip that over. Then if you remove the screws for this plate on the back, and the two in the corners have got ground straps, one's pink, one's black, so don't forget to put those back when you reassemble this. But just those three, they're all identical, removes the back plate and the solenoid. Be aware that that shaft and spring will fall out of the solenoid. I should tape those in really. There's our dry old belt. And then we can remove the capstan and flywheel, which will clear that little well for us to be able to clean. And you can see all that goo is all over that. It's horrible. So I think I took some acetone here. You have to be careful with acetone near plastics. Of course, this is all steel. It's a really nicely machined flywheel actually. And there's this little washer, little nylon washer on the back. Be careful not to lose that. As soon as I spotted that, I put that safe because that's got to go back a little bit later on. So we flip this back round, and I tried all sorts here. I tried flux remover to try and sort of congeal some of this rubber stuff. It's very hard to get down into that because of its sort of angle, and these big cotton buds, you can see they don't quite fit. I think I tried my sort of spongy ones, which weren't bad. What I kind of ended up doing was soaking cotton buds in alcohol and then actually tearing the bit of cotton off, pushing it down to the bottom with the dental pick, where I'm just picking some stuff out here right at the bottom of the well, and then putting a small flat screwdriver through the top bearing and just twizzling it round. And I've got some paper towel at the back just to catch the alcohol or anything else that I'm using to clean, so it doesn't go all over that board, so that just soaks it up. So this was just a painstaking thing I just kept coming back to just to get all this crap out, but it's all got to go so that we can have it clean for putting the new roller on. So finally I realised this yellow wire is all that's holding the transport in. It connects between two little capacitors, there's a little blade terminal, and then the whole thing comes away. So now I can undo the screw at the back to get the counter out, and this was a bit of a nightmare to do. I didn't have to completely remove the counter in the end. I could have just loosened it off a fair bit, and then you can kind of swing it round, and I sort of figure this out like that a little bit later on. But there's two sort of posts in the way, that means you'll likely get this wrong a few times. It's a real fiddle, and it kind of everything gets tangled on it. I think I might have the belt on the wrong wheel there as well. Again, I think I'll sort that out later on. But yeah, just to get that thing on was a bit of a nightmare. But yeah, it was nice to be able to remove the whole transport because there was some more cleaning to do. That idler wheel on the white plastic piece in the back, that needed the rubber renew because that contacts the outer edge of the flywheel. Then I corrected the counterbelt there, and I think we're all good. I've shifted the main unit out of the way for a bit because I'm going to concentrate on getting this capstan and this rubber sleeve in. Now, I've got a couple of these, as I'd ordered two kits, one that had the belts, a sleeve and pinch roller, and another one that had an idler tyre and another sleeve. One is really long, and one, you can see that little one in there is really short. Now this, even though it sort of came with a guide that says don't cut it down too much and all this sort of thing, this, to be honest, just looks like, I think it is, just a piece of tubing. Might be anything, aquarium pump tubing or something. It's quite squashy, it doesn't feel particularly grippy. Feels like it might be neoprene or something. Whereas this one, which I think is much more in line with the original, including this idler tyre I've got to fit. So that feels more like the real thing, feels more like the real rubber. I'd say it's cut more square at the edges. This warns of not cutting it too short because it can slide down the capstan shaft. Now, the original never had that problem, so again, this just, it feels sort of spongy and just a bit makeshift. Now, I'm not saying this won't work, but this model being, you know, the top of the tree in this sort of range. I want to give it the real thing, so I think I'm going to go with this one, which is to say, I believe the amount of rubber that I've cleaned out of that was definitely not that much. I'll say it was that much. Now, the idler tyre, again, I've got that replacement because as much as I could clean that old one up, I just think because this is going to be rubber against rubber, I don't want to mix up old and new and run into that problem in short order again, which seems pointless really after spending all the effort to clean it. So first thing I'm going to do is take this tiny little washer, I'm going to put it back on the bottom of the bearing there on the capstan, because I'm going to put a tiny amount of oil around the bottom. Because this has got this rubber sleeve on it, of course, you can't really go oiling it to death because it's got that double bearing. You've got the one on the top and then the one at the bottom of that. So I'm just going to put a little bit that will get around this bottom bearing. I'm going to put it on the bottom of there first so that when it's closed, the oil will make the final contact. So I don't want oil obviously to get all over this. I'm using this bottle of spindle oil, which is Mobile DTE Light. I got this for a Revox tape machine years back. I've still got the bottle, so just going to put a little bit on that bottom of that. Let's see if I can tape this out of the way. It's a real shame I can't remove that, but this ring is not a split ring on top, so I'm not able really to remove that pulley. I think the problem we're going to find is that it wants to lay sideways. Actually, no, it's gone in okay. And once that's in, it's going. That's it. Make sure that's pushed in all the way. I think I might have to just push it down a fraction. Yeah, that feels fine. Just so that it's not rubbing against the top bearing. Check it runs freely, which it does. So we can do the flat belt now. Which goes around these plastic guides. So like so. While I'm in here, I'm going to put a tiny drop of oil in the motor bearing. That's enough. So I've got the solenoid where the point goes backwards and the spring, and that's going to go back over there. So what I actually need to do is put that back over there, back in the solenoid. That. Line those back up. Screw them back in. As always with plastic, try and go backwards before you go forwards so that you hit the same thread. You shouldn't really feel any resistance. It should go with very light pressure. So solenoid's back in, ground points are done, motor's done. The next thing to do will be to fit that idler tyre and then reconnect that spring. Beauty. Just put a tiny bit of oil on this front bearing because the little white pulley is going to go over the front of that. I need to remember where I put that. There it is. Now it does have a crack in this pulley. I think it's going to be okay. I think even if I try to like glue it or something, that's probably a bad idea, because I think it's just going to pop again. As long as the grip is okay, it should be alright. And then we can put this final belt in. Ooh, that belt's not right. That's too big. That's disappointing. That belt is too big. I wonder if it's for a slightly different one. Right, I'm gonna have to see what I've got. Right, I managed to find one that fits. I'll see if I can get a measurement off that to put it up somewhere, because yeah, this one must be off a slight variation in this transport, because that's massive. Definitely doesn't fit that at all. But the counterbelt, it's quite obvious which was the counterbelt because it's the thinnest one in the set. Then obviously the flat belt's the flat belt, but that could have only been for there. And yeah, definitely not quite right. So see how we go on with that one. Obviously with this being on the front, if it doesn't quite work out, it's easy at the testing stage to find out. We don't have to take the transport out. So I think the next thing is going to be this new pinch roller. So where's that gone? There it is. So we're going to need the pin. Let's see if it's feasible to do this by hand. So that's the front. Again, there's a little crack I'm noticing just on the plastic housing here. If I just be careful with that, it should hopefully be okay. Yeah, I think I can do this by hand, just about. Oops. Done. So I actually just had to press that against the edge of the desk once it was in. Yeah, again, I find it easier just to get the first bit in by hand. It does rag on your fingers a bit, but just so it doesn't get bent sideways, because as I say, there's already a crack there. Again, should be okay. It's not one of those things you'd have to do often. One thing I can do before I forget as well is reconnect that spring. It's going to be done by hand, isn't it? And then I have to finagle this back under where it was there. I took that off, didn't I? Pinch roller back. Way down there. There's a metal bit that I've got to get that black peg. See the end of that black peg? It's got to lock in to this here. I think moves. Yeah, it moves down. So this is going to be interesting. And there's also that little bit there that sticks over. Has got to clear that little edge of that track there. Press buttons. Press the button down there, that's it. And then put that back over the top. That's looking good. Then we've got this linkage to go back. And there's a spring which goes that way. Against that, the top of that goes there. A little locking pin goes over top. That's it. And I think, apart from this belt, we'll see how it works. That is all our rubber done. Okay, transport's back in. It's not screwed in yet, but I've just reconnected all the connectors. I mentioned, I think it was this one earlier on this grey wire. Turns out you don't actually have to undo that one because it's not connected to the tape deck, it's connected underneath. But that one, the centre one, the side one, and the yellow wire, you definitely do. The fast forward is down. I've connected a 15-volt supply. If I turn it on, we've got run of the motor and we've got power. Now I don't know whether it's on radio or what. We've got something going on here. I'm going to plug something into the headphone output, have a look on the top, see what mode it's on, and see if we get any output from that. Actually got a little mirror here as well, just so I can see which transport button I'm pressing. So the big one in the middle is stop. Let's try the play. Well, that seems right. Good torque. This will want running in a little bit, but yeah, the pinch roll and everything all appears to be going. You can see the auto stop bar wiggling about there. Let's try rewind. Yep, all seems good. Let's put tape on it. The evergreen test tape. It's not actually George Formby, well, they might have recorded over it. Counter's going. Reset works. That pot must be very dirty because I can feel the tape speed going all over the place. Yeah, I can hear it revving. Let's see if we hear any sound. A lot of hissing. I wonder if we're on radio. All I'm hearing is a kind of broadband hiss. Oh, there we go. That's tape. So the speed will want calibrating on that, but this pot is all over the place. There we go. Meters are working. Oh, it seems to be the radio tuner. Well, how is it doing the radio tuner and the tape at the same time? Okay, there was a mixing setting, so you can mix the tape and the radio, and then there's a button that has to be in there. I'm not looking at it, it's in Japanese. I'm looking at it backwards through a mirror, and I'm reading it off the service manual in English. Okay, so it's working. It was the medium wave radio that was playing in the background. Let's just do a little bit of contact cleaner in this. That's better. Okay, that sounds miles off. Okay, so I've very loosely pulled in the speed. That pot's still not great at the bottom, so I do wonder if that might have to come apart and be cleaned and properly lubricated. It feels alright, but yeah, when it gets to the bottom it's still wobbly. I've got my video lights out again these winter days, I don't know. So I spent quite a bit of time last night kind of going over this and just checking all functions and just seeing what does and doesn't work, and it all mostly does work. Some of the switches want cleaning, so I've removed the top panel. It's not actually too bad to get this top panel out. You just sort of ease it forwards and then it will lift off, and all these switches have got these little sort of escutcheon things around them that I'm going to take all of those off and clean them all. Some of the switches do want to clean. If you've seen any of my previous videos, you'll know that I've taken apart stuff that was in much worse shape. This is incredible really, but yeah, just want to fettle up. I did clean the function buttons quite a bit early when I was working on the tape deck, and a surprising amount of muck actually came off them. I think that was the the cotton bud. So yeah, it's just sort of general grime, but nothing really untoward. As I say, because I was going over all this last night, testing out the functions, I discovered something that absolutely made my head fall off. The echo control, you would expect that that would just use a BBD chip, a bucket bridge delay chip, which is the really common chip that was used in most sort of karaoke machines analog delay guitar pedals, and that sort of thing. Really cheap and cheerful chip, commonly made by Panasonic, I believe. I think there was one that was very popular in the guitar community that they stopped making around the mid-2000s, and there was an uproar about it, but really common to find those chips. I fully expected that this would use a BBD chip. I was looking over this all this time and thinking, well, I haven't spotted that chip yet. It's usually about a 14 or 16 pin chip. There's a little chip down at the bottom here just hiding under this capacitor that got a heatsink on it, and I thought, well, that's too small to be a BBD chip, I think, but it is next to the echo control. I was kind of going through the circuit diagram and something caught my attention. I wondered why this was a 2-watt audio driver. Surely that should be a BBD chip, right? No, it doesn't use a BBD chip. In this void behind the board here, there's a spring reverb. It actually uses a spring reverb. The little transducers and the spring are right there. I'll put up a picture. I absolutely fell over just about when I discovered this yesterday. It was absolutely staggered to find there's an actual spring reverb. That's so cool. We've got to try that out later on. I sort of found it because that's it. When I had it on line or phono input and the mixing control was on, there's a noise that was coming from the machine, not on the headphone output, but actually from the machine. And it sounded almost like a motor or something running, and the echo control was right up. When I turned it down, it stopped. But yeah, I ran one side of a cassette through the headphones last night. That's settling in really nicely. I've yet to do the alignments on the motor speed and the head properly. I just dialed them in for pitch for now, just by ear. So I want to get on with cleaning all these. So during the course of doing the cleaning and testing all this, I mentioned earlier that one of the switches was giving some sort of crackle and dropping out channels, and it actually turned out to be the mixing switch. I was getting really erratic sort of operation from this, to the point I almost couldn't figure out what exactly it was meant to do. The only real solution to this was to take the board out here and remove the switch and disassemble it and clean it. It's very difficult to get a cleaning solution into these Alps toggle switches without disassembling them, so with some trepidation I removed this switch. You have to be really careful with this because look how close the iron is to the tuning cord and that bit of plastic. If one slip at that on that nylon cord and the whole thing's just going to go ping. So took the switch out, opening the little wings on the side here just to get the board out. You have to be careful with these, there's tiny little contacts inside them. There we go, when it's fully disassembled you can see how black those contacts are. So I took the contacts out, actually ended up soaking an envelope from my water bill in some contact cleaner, just rubbing them on the side, going over it with a fiberglass pen and some cleaner, reassembling it all, clamping them back together and soldering it back in. It now works perfectly, except it's got a slight squeak to it. But I'll take that over it crackling and dropping out channels. So the tuner faceplate's back on. That was a bit of a fiddle, but it's done. I did some more testing of this, and now of course I've removed the card that I had over the needle. I'm able to go over the full FM band and check it out, and that's when I discovered that this switch, so flip this over the other way, that was the one I've done before, the mixing switch. This, the mono stereo wide switch. This I'm gonna have to go back in. I'm gonna have to do this one. Got an issue where it's not on the surface, it's not locking very well with the FM stereo multiplex, so tuning around the band, the stereo will cut in and out, and I believe it's this switch that's causing the issue, because if you tune onto a station and manage to lock the stereo, tune off and tune on again, quite often it won't quite come back in, and if you fiddle with this switch you'll eventually get it to come back in. And that's because not only does this switch mix the audio channels for the mono stereo and then the phase splitter for the wide setting. But there's also a pole on that switch that connects back to the multiplex chip, which turns it off to reduce noise if you're not using it for stereo, and also of course disables the FM stereo LED. The Sanyo that I worked on recently did the same sort of thing. I think it's a fairly common way of doing it with these mono stereo switches, so I had a suspicion that this one would do the same, and it does. So I'm going to have to disassemble this switch. It's a little bit awkward on this one because there's a couple of bodge components on the back of it, a couple of factory bodges, there's a couple of little resistors. But actually, having flipped this upside down like this, I probably should have done this in the first place. I think it might make life a little bit easier, so I can put something over this faceplate to protect it. Yeah, so we can see hopefully on the back of there's some extra resistors that are just tacked across. I think they're tacked across to the shield of the switch, so it'll be a ground point that. So I'm gonna have to go in and unsolder one side of those and then zip this switch out. I think it's some kind of universal law that there is no container you can put switch cleaner in without it just destroying the container and leaking everywhere. These bottles I thought would be a great idea. It turns out they're absolute crap to begin with. I had to put an air hole in the side of it, which I have to cover with my finger because it just kept spitting out of the needle at the top. And also these with the spray nozzles, it just seems to eat the top of the spray nozzle and then all start pooling around here and then just pouring down the sides. It's just, whatever anyone does, it's infuriating. Be aware that if you do these, there's a little plunger bit in the middle of these with a sort of spring at the back of it, and it actually comes out. I thought it was all one piece, but it can fall out. I just put the switch sort of back together, didn't bend the tabs over, but just put it back together and then realised it wasn't clicking, it was just flopping side to side, and it's because that little bit had fallen out. But when I did just push it back together and try it, it had got that squeak that the other one had got. So I think they must have used some sort of lubricant in the middle of these, and obviously because I've cleaned the board now and the contacts and everything, I suppose I'll clean that off. So I'm going to put the tiniest bit of Molykote grease on this and just see if it will, in that middle bit, see if it will ease that problem. Oh, that's better. I think that's got it. Sorted. Strangely enough, that one that I said was squeaky is now okay, so it's probably just settled down a bit. But yeah, that feels great. Definitely helps, I think, to put a little bit of grease just in that center point, just a touch on the edge of the board. You don't want it to get in the contacts, obviously. But yeah, checked it with the meter. It was all working okay, so it's going to screw this board back in it once again. Right, so after soldering it back in, it's better. I'm noticing an improvement in the sound quality and the stereo positioning, definitely, so it's done us a favour. It worked really well for a start, and it started going off again. I wanted to check, I'm going to pull up the scope view here because I wanted to check the test point for the 19 kilohertz pilot tone, and looking at the frequency count, it's ever so slightly down, so I think what it is it's slightly just on the edge of kind of pulling in really well. So this pot down here, test point 7, it varies slightly from the service manual because the service manual I've got is the English version, and this of course is the Japanese machine, so the placements of the components on the radio board are slightly different. I'm still able to find the ground point, test point 6, and test point 7 is up here, and this pot is the adjustment for the 19 kilohertz. So I'm going to pull that up a fraction. Looking a bit ugly. See if we can give that a bit of a tweak. Yeah, it's more stable, isn't it? Just give that a bit of a scrub. Well, that's looking better, isn't it? It's a lot more stable. and our FM stereo lights on. Yeah, look at that. Lock straight back in. That's better. So much better. That's just picking up radio 1, even with a very weak signal on the bench, but straight away that's locking straight back in, which it wasn't doing before. And you can see on the scope actually as I do that, the multiplex is going on and off. So it's much more stable than it was now, and it's much closer to that 19 kilohertz. So that's sorted that right out. Brilliant. Alright, we're back together, almost. I've just got the screws to get back in. I've been doing some detailing and whatnot. There's a bit more to do, but for the purposes of the video, this is as far as I'm going to go, because I want to get this out there. Just a couple of notes when you're reassembling this. When you're getting the front panel back on, the top panel has got to be properly sort of hinged in the back, and then this front edge, you've got to kind of get this down so that the front panel will clip it in. It's a bit of a three-handed job, so you have to take care that you don't sort of scratch the plastic. So it took me a couple of attempts to get this lined up properly, and once it was lined up, to be fair, it just went straight in, no problem, no drama. But getting this top panel lined up was a little bit tricky. The FM stereo now and everything is working beautifully. Signal's not very strong here. I think it's picked up classic FM or radio 3 or something like that, but we'll do the demo outside or downstairs as always. A couple of notes again about this top switch section here. This varies a little bit from the Western version and the LEDs as well, if compared to the service manual for the Western version. Our 3 indicators are actually FM wireless, mixing, and FM stereo. When I first got this and I was trying the switches and everything, not quite sure what each one did, I was wondering why I was getting cassette, radio, and probably a mic input all at the same time. The reason is that in Japan, Sharp offered a wireless mic, which is indicated by this here. The wireless mic actually transmitted down at the bottom of their FM band. So you could set this to a wireless mic mode, tune the radio down to this indicator, and then that would play the wireless mic through the echo, which is why the echo was making that noise, because it was actually playing the radio through the echo, and then have a cassette on, so a karaoke cassette at the same time. So you need all 3 sources to do that. Obviously that wireless mic wouldn't be legal definitely in the UK if one still existed, but any kind of modern wireless mic that's properly licensed, you could connect to the mic input most likely. We'll give that a try a little bit later. I'm a little bit pushed for time this morning, but so that's why that was doing that. And also because especially the mixing control, that switch when it was dirty was cutting out one channel but not the other. It was intermittent. It was a bit hard to tell what exactly it was supposed to do. And again, yeah, with this stereo mono switch, I was getting erratic behavior on the FM stereo, and it was making the stereo image wander a little bit left to right because it wasn't making a very good connection. So yeah, you do really, if you've got issues with these switches, they do have to come apart, because there's not really any way for cleaner to penetrate into them. I think I've already said that, unless you take them apart, you know, and clean them. I haven't tried the APSS yet. I will give that a test. You can't test that until the front panel's on, because the big connector and obviously the buttons are all part of the front panel. The speaker grills, the sort of rubber around them, you have to be careful with. There was a lot of muck inside that, and sort of a chalky deposit, which I think is either plasticizer or mold release agent from when they're made. You get this sort of white coating on top, and I did clean it with some degreaser, which got a lot of muck out, but I found just going over it with a dry microfiber cloth afterwards does get a lot of that white sort of powdery look away from them. I'd be wary of either cleaning them with a rubber restorer or anything sort of too harsh, because one, it might make the rubber perish, and two, anything else you use might react with the painted finish. All right, quick, we're losing the sunlight, so let's do the demo. Let's bring this down to the Bottom of the broadcast band, and just do a quick band sweep. We get a little bit of stereo noise because we're in the kitchen here. It's a bit cold to take it outside, but the FM stereo working spot on there.
Lunar Eavesdroppers is an extract from a longer BBC Radio 3 documentary called Space Ham.
This button, your voice. Well, no, because you.
But it tell you that life was easy.
And the holiday is the pick for Paul in Glossop in Derbyshire. I have been around the Classic FM family as well to get some of their choices.
There have to be changes there, but the good.
Let's go to the cassette. I haven't tried the APSS yet. Oh, it works. For its size, it's not a bass monster, but they weren't supposed to be in 1980, they were supposed to be loud, and it will go very, very loud. Especially on radio where you can imagine modern stations are so loudly modulated. It will, something like Radio 1, you know. I got that halfway volume earlier and it was almost painful, it's just so loud.
London Grammar with you and I, Matt, it is really just you and I.
It is, isn't it?
London Grandma. I almost forgot the spring reverb. This is with it off, and this is with it on. It makes you sound like a robot. It's a very short spring. It's a very woolly sounding mic preamp as well. So, yeah, it kind of sounds like a bad train station tannoy. It's a novelty for sure. But yeah, what you should really get out of that, I don't know. I think it would have been better going with the BBD chip, honestly. But yeah, spring reverb is there if you want it. It's certainly a novelty. And now it's time for Springer's final thought. All this time I've been running this off the bench power supply, so I've still got to source a proper power supply for it, and it just needs about a 15 volt 2 amp will be perfectly sufficient for it. These tweeter controls, the sort of novelty adjustments for the separate tweeters, I don't really know why you'd ever want them anything other than all the way up. It sounds best definitely when you're at the front of it. You can really hear those tweeters, they do really crisp up that top end. I haven't tried it, but I imagine if you were to put a CD player, for example, in the line input, because this has got a separate line input and phono input, so you can connect a turntable and a CD player if you want to show off. I imagine that will sound really crispy throughout that. It was a little intimidating having all these controls and them all in Japanese to begin with. I think the owner might find that a little bit intimidating to begin with, but once I'd got them all working properly and I'd spent enough time with it, I got quite comfortable with them really. It is pretty well featured, it's almost over featured in a way. It's kind of interesting that the APS-S goes all the way to 11 in true Spinal Tap fashion. But yeah, it's kind of another one of those, isn't it, that, you know, if you'd had this in 1980 in Japan, you would have been king. It's yeah, it's pretty bling, and it's massive and incredibly loud if you want it to be. And yeah, really cool looking. The differences between these and, you know, the other machines I've worked on, like the Sanyos and the Hitachis, are all what make them interesting to me. You could almost accuse this of being a bit more plasticky in a way than some of the other machines, but not really, I don't think, to its detriment. They've all got their own kind of style. There's sometimes a bit of an attitude kicked around that, oh, the old machines all kind of look the same. I think once you deal with them enough and you have that experience of what each manufacturer was sort of aiming towards a little bit, then especially from the Japanese domestic market models, I think, you know, the unique points really sort of stand out in an interesting way. And for someone who is a collector of, or has a small collection of a few different ones, definitely really nice to sort of show off all those kind of unique aspects of each one. By this point I'm probably rambling, so I can't think of much else really to say on this. As is obvious throughout the video, apart from just dust and the melted rubber and a slight tweak to the FM multiplex alignment, there was nothing untoward about this model. It certainly wasn't, you know, a massive restoration or anything. It was in beautiful condition. I've seen others of this model since on the same Japanese auction site. I haven't seen anything myself that's been in the condition that this was in. So I was really pleased to be able to pick this up in this condition. It didn't have the box and the manual or anything like that, though it was very, very nicely packed. And I love the unique details on this that make it unique to the Japanese market, like the New Life Now sticker, which is actually spelled properly. Some of them say New Life No. It's a bit of a mistranslation, but I don't really know what that sort of hand symbol and the heart is, but in that kind of quirky Japanese way, I really like it. I think it's really interesting to have one that's all kind of marked up in Japanese compared to the obviously the Western market model. The 505 ST was the silver version, where you've got the silver plastic, whereas this you've got the kind of very dark metallic grey painted plastic and the black tuner dial. So the ST model has the silver tuner dial. I guess it's a matter of personal preference which you think is the best looking. I think the owner prefers the sort of black and silver. They're a bit more kind of retro, a bit more nostalgic to him, so I think he'll be happy with this. But yeah, what a lovely example of an absolute monster, and staggering to think that this is coming up to 45 years old at this point in making the video. So for anyone who's got one of these and is looking for a bit of guidance to help them with a few technical pointers on them, I hope that's of some help to anyone else. I hope it was interesting to watch or some kind of entertainment. And take care of yourselves and each other.